We did it! We got temporary residency.
We didn't leave Mexico.
We didn't prove financial solvency.
And we got 4 years.
Let's talk. Okay, so we are done. We officially have temporary residency, and the program we use is often nicknamed the Forgiveness Program, but is technically one of Mexico's regularization programs. When your FMM is expired, or if you're in the country without any kind of visa, you are irregular. And so the regularization program is essentially for foreigners who are physically in Mexico already and who have decided to reside in Mexico, but for whatever reason, has not been able to do it through kind of the normal methods of leaving, going to a consulate in a foreign location, and then coming back here. Technically, I believe this program actually began in 2015, maybe even earlier, and from then till now, it's had several different formats. It's been tweaked, it's been varied. Now, at the end of this video, I'm gonna tell you how I almost completely messed up my appointment, but we'll do that later because I think you are hopefully unlikely to make the ridiculous mistakes that I made. But first, let's just talk about how the program works today. The way the current program works, essentially it's for foreigners who are physically in Mexico already, who hold an expired FMM, an opportunity to become a temporary resident for up to 4 years in country without ever leaving. But of course, it's not available to everyone, so who can apply? Online, all the documents that I can find currently all say that you have to have had your very first entry into Mexico sometime before January 1st, 2020. And that at the time of applying for residency, you have to have an expired FMM. So your 180 days need to already be expired. But I will note that Barbie, who is the lawyer I went through, has recently had a client whose first entry into Mexico was actually March of 2020, and she was still able to get her 4-year temporary residency. And I say this just to show that Mexico is constantly evolving, the rules are constantly changing. It's one of the things I love about Mexico, and sometimes one of the things I find frustrating because it's not always easy to find black and white rules. So again, this program is constantly being changed, being tweaked to accommodate the needs and goals of INM, of Mexico. Just keep that in mind. There's no guarantee of how long this program will last. Although, like I said, Barbie was able to get temporary residency for somebody who had first entered Mexico March of 2020, which is pretty phenomenal. I think it leans towards the concept that maybe Mexico is going to continue expanding this program for people who have arrived in Mexico after 2019. That being said, I'm not a lawyer, and honestly, even the INM professionals, they can't predict the future and how this will tweak. So it is a matter of keeping your ear on the ground and just staying as up to date as possible until you're able to officially start applying if this program is something that interests you. I will also note that Mexico has multiple states just like the US, and each state is able to kind of translate or execute on these rules using their own interpretation. Some INM offices translate the requirement of being in Mexico as you have to have come to Mexico in 2019 or earlier, or perhaps March 2020 or earlier, and have stayed the entire time, meaning by now you've been expired for well over a year. Chiapas is actually one of those states where last I checked, their translation is you have to have been in Mexico the entire time. You cannot have come and gone in order to stay regular. The Yucatan, and specifically Merida, translates it to, yeah, your first entry had to be before March 2020. However, it's totally fine that you've come and gone to maintain regularization so long as the day that you apply, you are at that point irregular, aka your FMM has expired at that point. Now, I know Yucatan is not the only place that does this. However, I really can't speak to which other states might allow this. So this is where I think seeking help from whatever Mexican state you think you might apply for residency is probably a smart idea. And at the end of the day, I think using a lawyer or trusted provider who can help you through the regularization program is super smart. I am beyond grateful that Barbie helped me with this program because otherwise I would not be here today telling you that I'm a temp resident. But just keep in mind, it's super important, whatever INM you're going to use, that you do contact them and or a super reputable lawyer or somebody who can make sure that you're up to date on all the specific requirements. For myself and Alex, we chose to become temporary residents for 4 years, and currently in Merida, that is the only option for the regularization program. However, I do have a friend also in Merida who in January was able to use the regularization program to become a temporary resident for herself and her son, and they only had to do it for 1 year, which is cheaper in terms of how much you have to pay that day. Although in the long run, I do think it's a much better deal to just go for the 4 years. So unless you're really strapped for cash, or if you know that you just want to stay in Mexico for 1 year, I would lean towards going for 4. But most importantly, Merida in particular has stopped allowing people to use the regularization program for only 1 year. So in Merida, if you use the regularization program now, you do have to do it for the entire 4 years. Although this makes me wonder if other states will allow you to do temporary residency for a shorter time period, 1, 2, or 3 years. It could be something to look into if that interests you. Again, big picture, I think you save much more money by doing the entire 4-year program. So what are the costs for becoming a temporary resident through the regularization program? So 1, I do want to say the payments have to be 100% in cash. There's no credit card payments, there's no debit card payments, there's no transfer you can do. You have to go to the bank with cash in order to make these payments. So the regularization fee, I think of it kind of like the application fee, is 1,514 pesos because you are now irregular and you have to become regular. You also have to pay a regularization fee or a fine because you're irregular, even though the program requires you to be irregular to even apply. But either way, my point is you have to pay a fee specifically because you're irregular. That fee is 1,924 pesos. And then you have to pay for however length of time you're planning on getting temporary residency. Now this figure is the same amount that you would pay through the normal temporary residency program, except that the normal temporary residency program requires you to start with 1 year only, and then at your renewal process, you can renew for up to 3 years. So it's really the same figures. It's just that, especially in Merida, where you can only do the 4-year plan, you have to pay all 4 years up front. And so for all 4 years, it is 10,658 pesos. Whether you're an adult or a minor, all of these fees are 100% the same. So I had to pay 14,096 pesos in total, and Alex had to pay an additional 14,096 pesos for his residency. Now, just as an FYI, if we were allowed to do only 1, 2, or 3 years, these are the amounts that you would have to pay. And just to see the difference, this is what you had to pay last year. So you'll notice that the fees have gone up a little bit, but not crazy significantly. So just know that if you are hoping to do this, let's say in 2023 or another date, you're probably gonna have to pay more than what I had to pay this year, but fingers crossed that it's not a dramatic difference. Also keep in mind that the application fee as well as the fine for being irregular could go up every year. I'm told that as early as January of this year, the fine for being irregular for some places was as low as 500 pesos. So just keep in mind that other numbers could also increase, as well as if you're using somebody to help you with the service, that cost could also increase. As an FYI, I paid Barbie 3,500 pesos per person, so 7,000 total for me and Alex to help us with this process. I absolutely think it was worth it. But 1, Barbie is not the only person that helps with this service, so if you have somebody else you trust, feel free to shop around and find somebody that you think is perhaps within your budget, or especially somebody who can help you with the particular state that you want to do this in. But 2, there are several people that actually do this without any help from any lawyer or any service. And having gone through it now, I can tell you, yeah, it's totally feasible to do it without any help. I just didn't want to take that risk, and I'm super glad. Like I said, I messed up on my day, so I was so glad to have Barbie to advise me on how to fix myself, basically. Now, for me, the absolute best part of this program, not only could I get 4 years of temporary residency, whereas the normal temporary program, I'd have to start with 1 and then do it again in 1 year. I did not have to prove a single penny of financial solvency. I didn't have to prove my income. I didn't have to prove what I had in my savings account, none of that. Literally, we showed up with our passports, our expired FMMs, we had to pay the fine, and we were good. This to me was epic because if you watched, when I attempted for the second time to become a temporary resident through the normal program, with the new increase in financial requirements, I did not at that time, and I still do not, meet the income requirements to get temporary residency through the normal program. My options this month was either to leave the country again and come back and hopefully get the 180 days, or use the forgiveness program and become a temporary resident. Speaking of the 180-day tourist visitor permit, the FMM, I absolutely do understand the frustration and anxiety in not knowing for sure if you're going to get the 180 days when you enter Mexico. Like I absolutely get it. I also find it frustrating to not know for sure what's going to happen. But please know that more often than not, people are getting the 180 days. Now this part has not been tested by myself yet, but I'm told that when my 4 years is up, I'm able to then immediately apply for permanent residency through the normal permanent residency program. Again, this is not my area of expertise, and I really haven't looked closely into becoming a permanent resident at this point, but it is something that I'm apparently eligible for, having gone through the regularization temporary residency process, which is pretty cool, like really cool. So let's talk about the I&M process. Like I already said, I used Barbara Blanco from Merida Moves. She helped me with everything. She did so much more for me than she had to. Barbie is above and beyond all the things you will need. All the things you will need if you want to move to Merida. All the things. So I want to note that I applied for an appointment at I&M back in April. April was when I contacted Barbie and told her, hey, this is something I want to do. Can you help me do it? And she got my passport information and Alex's passport information and set up the appointment for me. When she set up the appointment for me, she also double checked that we were in fact eligible for the regularization program, because that would suck to show up and find out that there's some requirement that we were not eligible for. So Barbie made sure all of that was good to go and again made the appointment. Today, unfortunately, Merida no longer has an appointment system. It's literally first come, first serve. And so Merida's I&M offices opened at 9 o'clock in the morning, and I'm told that people are there before 7 a.m. to get in line and get their name in the books so that they can be seen. And so especially if you're not using anyone's help, this is the method you would have to use. I have heard that some services will stand in line for you so that you don't have to physically be there at 7 in the morning, but just know, especially if you're doing it by yourself, that it is now first come, first serve. However, if you do have an appointment, all the appointments, to my knowledge, are being honored, so you don't have to worry about losing your appointment again, unless you mess up. Unless you do that. Okay, so like I said, when I show up for my appointment, I needed my passport, my expired FMM. There is an application form and a cover letter. The cover letter, Barbie was not able to fill in for me. At the I&M appointment, I had to fill it in for myself. We'll get to that in just a minute. Sometimes the person you're working with is okay with it being pre-filled and sometimes not. And so to be safe, Barbie left this blank and just let me know it's something I'm gonna have to fill at the appointment. And of course, you have to have the 3 receipts proving that you went to the bank and paid for the fees that you're required to pay. So again, for me, it ended up being a total of $14,096, double that for Alex. And the payments had to be made in cash at the bank. It doesn't necessarily matter when you make those payments. I could have made those payments a week ago, but I did have to bring the receipts to show that I paid. I'm gonna note that if you are doing this on your own, I would actually recommend not making the payments until you are 100% sure that everything is good with your application. Meaning, I would ultimately go at least twice to the I&M office. The first time with all my other documents, just to make sure I'm eligible, just to make sure that I've got all the paperwork and everything is good. And then when the I&M officer tells you, yep, all you need now is the payment, then I would go make the payments and then make the second trip to actually finalize everything, because I have heard that there are people who think they're eligible for the program. Turns out they're not eligible for the program, but they've already paid the banks. It can take several months, maybe even a year, to get your money back. You will not get all of it back, but to get the gist of your money back can take several months. And so, yeah, just for me, I would make sure your paperwork is good, or you already know, give Barbie a call. Oh, and the mistake I made, the ridiculously stupid, almost lost my appointment mistake, was not having cash on me the morning of my appointment. Now, normally I only get cash out via the ATM, and because I needed 35,000 pesos that day, I kind of had a huge problem. Luckily, I'm not the first one that had this problem. Barbie has dealt with this many times before, so she told me about a new app that I could use that would allow me to transfer the entire thing to myself at a Banco Azteca, which is what I did. Normally, however, this can take hours to days to actually accomplish. But again, Barbie, in her experience, was like, you have to call Zoom and let them know how important this is, and they will expedite it for you, which is exactly what I did. So while I was going to Banco Azteca to get my cash out, Barbie went to the bank where I would pay the I&M fees, stood in line for me, and took care of all of that. So everything worked out nicely. We barely made it to our appointment because, of course, banks can kind of take a long time to make things happen. So definitely do not wait till the day of to get your cash out. Also be aware that there are people who will scam you on getting temporary residency, whether they call it the regularization program or the regular program. So you really want to make sure that you use a very, very reputable person. I know at least a couple people in San Chris who fell for a scam. Either do it yourself directly through I&M or find a reputable lawyer, the I&M process. So whether you have an appointment or whether you're just waiting outside for your chance to come in, once you are in the building, you will of course sign in and let them know why you're there. And then specifically at the Merida office, they'll give you a number and it will tell you your window number as well as the sequence number. For example, Alex and I had window 3 and 4, and I was, I think, customer 4 and Alex was customer 3 or 2. So it was a little bit confusing because you're waiting in this office. You can see the windows pretty clearly, but there's no line for the window. So when a window becomes available, they will say, you know, the next person for window 4, and they may or may not say what number they're on. So essentially you're gonna go up to the front, you're gonna show them your number. So window number 4, number 2. If anyone else shows up, they will show window number 4, number 3, let's say. And because your number is smaller than theirs, you will get seen before they do. Kind of make sense? So it is important to be aware that that second number does matter, and it's letting you know the order that the window is going to see you. Okay, Alex and I got seen by 2 different people at 2 different windows. Luckily, they were next to each other. Again, I was window 3, Alex was window 4. I got seen first just because that window became available first. And then towards the end of my portion, Alex started his portion, again, sitting next to me so I could easily talk to both I&M officers if I needed. So on the form that you filled, or that Barbie fills, for your I&M applications, things they needed to know: my passport info, the city and state in the US that I'm from, how many kids I have, my highest level of education, my religion, my height, weight, tattoos, if I've got birthmarks. I think that was it. But the only document I showed was my passport and my expired FMM. I will note that for Alex, I have no idea how tall he is, and I had no idea how much he weighed. I'm 5'6½", and I just said, yeah, he's probably 5'3". I still don't know his actual height, but he is getting taller and taller. And I put down 100 pounds for Alex. Nobody took our weight or height or anything, so I feel like an approximate is okay. Now, basically, Barbie filled out all of my paperwork for me, so there wasn't too much I had to do. They did at one point ask me what my occupation was. Now, I am retired military, so that's what I told them. Then I was asked to fill out the cover letter. Now, my Spanish is not perfect. And of course, the I&M officer was speaking to me in Spanish for the most part. There were a couple words she knew, but essentially she was speaking Spanish. And so when she told me to fill out the form, I translated what she asked to, why do you want to become a temporary resident? I wrote that I want to become a temporary resident because I've fallen in love with Mexico and I want to stay here as long as they'll let me. So that's the question I answered. When it was Alex's turn to answer the same question, his I&M officer, who spoke really good English, gave me the same form and told me to fill it out for him. But she said, in English, write down why our FMMs are expired. Why did we become irregular? I had like a split second where I thought, ooh, do I need to change my answer on my form? But then I kind of realized, well, we're expired because we fell in love with Mexico and we want to stay here as long as we possibly can. Yeah, I think it works out that the answers worked for both questions. Kind of neat. And once all the paperwork is approved, all that was left was fingerprints, which they do electronically on site, taking our photos, again, which they do electronically on site. 2.5 hours after starting our appointment, we walked out temporary residents. So how was that, the actual I&M appointment?
Boring. I did literally nothing. Like, I scanned my fingerprints like once.
Okay, so you scanned fingerprints, took your picture.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you had to like show all sides of your face.
Yeah, but mostly I just sat down and waited.
Did anyone ask you any questions?
No.
So you didn't have to say anything in English or Spanish?
No. They asked me if I could get my mom.
Yeah. What is any advice you give for people who want to get residency here?
Honestly, immigration is a little bit hard now. There are changing rules all the time.
Yes.
I'm gonna highly recommend it. Get some help.
Yes.
You know, so we do this process, but also it's a lot of people. If you want to try with different people, it's a lot of people they do this too. You know, I mean,
Yeah.
we're a lawyer, but it's a lot of people they do this. Try me too. That is not that expensive, and I think that's gonna take you a lot of these worries, especially with the payments. Because if you miss one payment or you get a mistake with one payment, they're gonna give you the money, yes, but at the end of the year. Or if you speak Spanish, come several times to get really informed.
Yeah.
The only problem now is because they don't have an appointment, you're gonna need to come. It's people get in line since 7 a.m. now. You're gonna need to go the line, then go inside. They're gonna tell you what payments you need to do. Then you're gonna need to go out, pay in the bank, and then go back, do the line again, and then do the process. So
you
that's why,
skipped that part by doing it before.
because we already know the process, we already know what payments you need to do. That's why we came first to the bank and pay everything, and then go back because you have an appointment.
Yeah.
So when you already have an appointment, because this is so precious now, we don't want to lose the appointment under any circumstances. So that's why we make that easier for you, you know, pay first and all that stuff. So in that way, you don't lose your appointment. That's why we try to, you know, help our clients in the best way so they can get it and then, you know, print the form the same day, because
Yes.
this is more easier.
I appreciate it. It was very helpful to say. Oh my goodness. So in conclusion, you want to use a service like Barbie, not only because the INM rules and requirements can change very quickly all the time, and their job is to be like in the know of any new processes, but also because Barbie will help you overcome obstacles with INM and obstacles created by her clients who decide to wait till the last minute to get cash. Hopefully you're smart enough to not make that mistake. I thought I was smart enough to, but apparently, no, I am not. I was so freaked out that day. I had royally messed up. And if Barbie was not there to maintain the cool and giving me her experience with what other clients have had to do with the Zoom app and Wise and all these other things, if she was not there with her expertise, I would have just been SOL. I would have not been able to pay the money. I would have essentially lost my appointment. And so yeah, again, it's not required that you use Barbie or anyone's help to get temporary residency, whether through the regularization program or through the normal program. And honestly, I do think most people are still getting their 180 days, so long as they're not making themselves look like someone who just wants to move to Mexico, and especially if you don't make yourself look like someone who just wants to move to Mexico because it's cheaper. If your only reason to come to Mexico is for affordable living, I don't know if I would recommend it. If you are not enchanted by the idea of getting to know an entire new country, or Mexico in particular, there's so many reasons why people don't stay in Mexico forever. And I think part of it is coming here expecting to stay in America, but just cheaper. That's not what's gonna happen here. You are coming to a whole new country, which certainly has some similarities to the US, but has some very distinct differences from the US. Coming here with an open heart and open mind, ready to explore, ready to learn the new and amazing things in Mexico is gonna serve you so much more than if you're coming here solely because it's cheaper. I would only come to Mexico if you're interested in learning about Mexico. That's the best way to success. And so if you haven't watched yet my video on why people leave San Cris, then I'm gonna recommend you watch that next before you spend too much of your time worrying about becoming a resident. You should worry about whether you really want to be here.